Chapter 1. Born beneath twin shadows. Do you hear it, child of stars? The silence before prophecy breathes. The hum of twin suns over a wasteland grave. The Force remembers. Even when mortals forget, long before the Empire, before the fire and the fall, there was sand, coarse, endless, eternal. The world of Tatooine, a planet ignored by stars and law alike, baked beneath twin suns that scorched the bones of the forgotten. Here, in the shadow of moisture farms and rusted junk, a birth occurred, not heralded by angels, nor witnessed by kings, but by silence. A mother, Shmi Skywalker, bore a child with no father. No man touched her, no flame of passion, only the Force, a ripple in destiny, an echo of something ancient. Awakened, he was named Anakin, but the Force did not name him. The Force simply ... trembled. Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, led not by command, but by something deeper. The living Force found the boy in the chaos of a podres, not a chance meeting. No, nothing is chance in the web of fate. The boy's blood, whispered secrets, a count beyond measure, midichlorians swarming like stars around a black hole. Too perfect, too dangerous. Qui-Gon, rogue among monks, believed the ancient prophecy spoke of him, the chosen one, born to bring balance to the Force. But prophecy is a liar's mirror. It shows what you desire, not what will be. The Jedi Council received the boy with veiled suspicion. He was too old, already bound to a mother he would one day leave, already touched by fear. Fear, they said, led to anger, and anger to hate. But they could not see that it was their own fear that poisoned the temple halls. Yoda peered into the boy's soul and saw a storm not yet named. Mace Windu heard Qui-Gon's plea and offered only cold deferral. The council denied training, but Qui-Gon defied them. Obi-Wan Kenobi, apprentice no longer, was chosen to take the boy on in Qui-Gon's place, not from vision, not from belief, but out of debt. Obi-Wan did not see a savior. He saw an obligation, and so the boy left Tatooine. He left his mother behind, her tears hidden in wind and dust. He left freedom in chains for the illusion of purpose. The Jedi believed they had brought him to the light, but what they had done was take him from his roots and plant him in soil that would never hold him. Do you feel it now? The subtle fracture beneath the song. The Force does not rejoice. It murmurs. It aches. Anakin's dreams began not in the temple, but on the journey. The stars outside the viewport were cold and distant, but in his mind he saw flames. He saw Padme Amidala, the Queen, her eyes like carved obsidian, her voice already etched into his core. He did not know love, not yet, but the seeds were sown. The Jedi would try to cut them before bloom, but their knives were dull and blind. In those early days, the galaxy spun quietly. Wars had not yet erupted. Sith were a whisper, not a storm. But beneath it all, something stirred. A phantom cloaked in democracy, a predator wearing peace. Darth Sidious watched from the Senate floor. His eyes, hidden behind smiles, narrowed on the boy. He did not see a child. He saw a lever, a future blade. He saw the Force. Out of balance and balance, to the Sith is a throne to be broken. Anakin's training began under Obi-Wan's strict gaze. Form over feeling, doctrine over intuition. But the boy was no ordinary Padawan. His power surged and shattered restraint. He built droids from scrap, read star charts like poetry, moved objects without trying. But the code demanded humility. The temple demanded patience, and the Force, it demanded truth. The boy was never patient, and the Jedi were never truthful. In quiet corridors, he walked alone. In the meditation chambers, he failed to still the torrent within. Other students feared him, not for his rage, but for the intensity of his presence. He bent light, even as they told him to stay within it. He was a sun taught to pretend it was a candle, and still he burned at night. The dreams returned. His mother calling to him, lost in sand and shadow, death unspoken but always near, and always Padma, her touch imagined, her breath a ghost. Upon his skin, the Jedi said, let go. He could not. Because to let go was to forget what little he had. Even as a boy, Anakin understood this truth. The Jedi wanted order. He wanted connection, and that is why he would fall. Not out of evil, not from hate, but from yearning. He would fall, chasing love, the Jedi forbade, and peace, the Sith, corrupted. Do you hear the wind, now, across the dunes? It still carries his name, not Vader, not Skywalker, just Anakin. He who was born not beneath light, but twin shadows. He who would break the galaxy to hold what he loved. He who was never truly free, and in that birth the Force shifted. The balance tilted, the echo began. But prophecy is a flame that consumes both the herald and the world it touches. The Jedi lit that flame and walked away. Chapter 2. The Temple of Glass and Chains, the Jedi Temple, rose from Coruscant's heart like a blade hidden in plain sight, a monument of light built atop a mountain of forgotten darkness. Its towers reached toward stars they barely understood, its spires carved in the likeness of ancient victories. But within, behind each silent corridor and sterile arch, the Force was not free. It was caged, curated, tamed by creed. Anakin Skywalker entered this temple not as a Jedi, not as a child, but as a fracture waiting to deepen. The High Council gave him a place, a bed, a master. Obi-Wan, now a knight, took on the role with discipline, but no certainty. He taught what he had been taught. He quoted the code as scripture, not as truth. He believed that control was wisdom, and that emotion was a flaw to be scraped from the soul. But Anakin felt everything. And in secret, he began to learn what the Jedi never spoke aloud, that to feel was to suffer, and to suffer was to walk alone within the temple walls. Anakin trained among the hopeful initiates in rows, sabers humming like choir notes, breathing in unison. They meditated upon peace. They were told to reject fear, but Anakin's fear was not abstract. It wore his mother's face. It bled from dreams he could not escape. It curled like smoke beneath his skin. And the masters, seated high above in distant towers, felt it, but did not heal it. They observed, they recorded, they waited. It was not training, it was containment. The temple taught that all things must be let go. The past, the self, the flesh. Yet they wielded lightsabers, weapons of elegance, carved from energy and will. They wore robes to signify peace, yet commanded armies when crisis came. They rejected possession but clung to structure. They claimed to serve the Force, but had forgotten how to listen. Anakin noticed. Even as a boy, he saw their contradictions. He spoke of dreams, of fear, of attachments, and was told these were distractions. He asked about his mother, and was met with silence. He asked about love, and was warned. He did not stop feeling. He learned instead to hide. And so the boy walked the halls in silence. A golden braid marked him as a learner, yet his gaze was older than many masters. Yoda watched him closely. The Ancient One, bent with years, saw in Anakin a storm forming just beyond the horizon. Not darkness, not yet, but something that the Jedi no longer understood. Yoda counseled patience. He spoke of the long view. But the boy had lived as a slave. He did not care for long views. He wanted to save. Now, a friendship bloomed where rules forbade it. Padma Amidala, no longer queen, now senator, returned to the boy's orbit like a forgotten moon. Their reunions were brief, political, distant, but the seed had already split open in his chest. When he looked at her, he saw not duty, he saw freedom. He saw a life unburdened by robes and riddles. He saw a world the Jedi would never let him have. The Force grew stronger in him. It did not hum, it howled. When he sparred, his blade moved, faster than his thought. When he reached out, objects leaped from across the chamber into his hand. The masters praised his progress, but behind their compliments was fear. They had not made him strong. He already was, and strength, to them, was dangerous when born from passion. Anakin did not know the words for what he felt. He only knew he was drowning in expectation. A chosen one, they whispered. A prophecy thousands of years old, spoken in forgotten tongues that one would bring balance to the Force. But what was balance to those who believed only in light? To the Jedi, darkness was disease. They did not want balance. They wanted conquest over the shadow, and so they taught him to deny the storm inside. But denial is not cleansing, it is burial, and buried things rot. Sometimes Anakin would wake. In the temple dormitories, breathless, drenched in sweat, visions, not nightmares, pulled him into futures not yet written. Fire, screams, Padme, reaching for him through smoke. Obi-Wan, blade drawn. A hooded figure laughing in the shadows. He spoke of these dreams to Obi-Wan, who told him dreams pass in time. But they did not pass. They returned, louder, and in his silence the boy began to drift, toward whispers that answered when no Jedi would. The Chancellor, Palpatine, had taken notice. From his golden chambers in the Senate, the leader of the Republic offered an ear when others offered judgment. He praised Anakin's strength, called him gifted, special. He fed what the Jedi starved identity, each praise. A subtle chain, each meeting, a link in a future forged by deception. And so the Jedi Temple, carved from light and marble, became for Anakin not a sanctuary, but a cage. Its windows let in stars, but barred escape. Its teachers preached freedom, but offered only obedience. The boy who once longed for the stars began to see that the stars were not for him. They would never trust him. They would never let him love. They would never let him be whole. The Force trembled, sensing the fracture deepening. Anakin, the boy born of prophecy, raised among ghosts, watched the temple spires from his sleeping mat and wondered, if this was peace, why did it feel like silence before collapse? He would not yet betray them, not yet, but the seed had split. The vine had begun to coil, and the Force, in its infinite memory, whispered softly, "The cage is glass." The fall begins not in fury, but in quiet. Chapter 3. The fires of Geonosis Sister is a moment in every myth where silence breaks, and war becomes breath. For the Jedi, that moment came on a world of redstone and insect screams. Geonosis, a place not marked on sacred charts, but whispered of in shadows. It began with a rescue. A senator lost, a friend in danger. Padma Amidala, Ever the flame in Anakin's sky had flown to confront the storm before the Senate would even speak of clouds. The council forbade interference, but Anakin did not hear them. He heard only her voice. He felt only her absence. And where duty trembled, love commanded. He followed. Obi-Wan followed him, and the galaxy followed them both into war. Geonosis was a furnace, its skies thick with dust and deceit. Beneath its crust, factories hummed with a new kind of life. Metal soldiers, droid minds, endless legions born not from womb but from wire. The Confederacy had risen, and with it, Count Dooku, once Jedi, now apostate, once light, now twilight. His voice spoke of truth, that the Republic was a hollow beast, and the Sith walked freely in its skin. Obi-Wan was captured. Padma was imprisoned, and Anakin, rushing to save them, walked deeper into fate. In the arena, beneath 1,000 watching eyes, beasts were loosed. Chains clanged, sand burned, and the boy, no longer a boy, stood at the edge of two paths. The Jedi cold and watching, and the woman he could not let go. Before blades were drawn, Padme spoke the truth the Jedi forbade. I truly, deeply love you, and so the blade was drawn. Jedi reinforcements descended from the sky, a rain of robes and light. Sabers clashed with steel, flesh fell to metal, and above all, the Force screamed. This was not justice, it was slaughter. Mace Windu struck down Jango Fett with purple fire, his saber an executioner's torch. Yoda arrived not with wisdom, but with war, and from the shadows a new army emerged. Clone soldiers, bred for battle, birthed for loyalty. None asked where they came from. None asked why the Sith were always one step ahead in this chaos. Anakin found Dooku, and in the old man's gaze he saw not hatred, but warning. They dueled master against potential, future against decay. Obi-Wan joined, blades weaving, through air like prophecy. But Dooku was precise, calculated, ruthless. He felled Obi-Wan, and with a twist of darkness, severed Anakin's hand, clean, deliberate, final. The boy who was to bring balance fell in that moment, not in body, but in faith. As his saber fell, so too did his trust. In the order, in its protection, in its power, the war had begun, not with a declaration, but with a scream, and in that scream a vow was made. Anakin, arm replaced with metal, bound himself to Padme in secret, not in joy but in fear, fear of losing her, fear of the visions that had begun to haunt him. In darkened chambers, in restless sleep, he saw her die again and again, always beyond reach. The Jedi taught that attachment was forbidden, but they never taught what to do with love. In the cold light of Coruscant, the Republic celebrated. Victory, Jedi were now generals, peacekeepers made into soldiers. And the clone army marched beneath the banners of a republic that no longer knew peace. Anakin stood beside Chancellor Palpatine, who praised him, raised him, guided him deeper. Into halls the Jedi did not enter, and in that closeness, something invisible curled a thread, a bond, a tether of shadow. Palpatine did not rush, he did not command, he merely waited. The way a predator waits for the wound to fester. Anakin's faith in the Jedi faltered further when his visions deepened. Dreams of Padme dying in childbirth. Blood on white stone, breath fading beneath stars. He asked Yoda for counsel. The ancient master told him, "Let go of all you fear to lose." But Anakin did not want to let go. He wanted to save. And so the seeds of geonosis, war, betrayal, hidden truth bore fruit. The Jedi had ignited a war they did not understand, with soldiers they did not control, under the banner of a republic already lost. And in that war the Chosen One walked. A path lit not by prophecy, but by desperation. Geonosis burned, and with it the illusion of balance. The Force wept that day, not because darkness rose, but because the light stopped questioning itself. The boy who once stood beneath twin suns now stood between empires, and the fire had only just begun. Chapter 4. Dreams of Her. Death Sleep became a battlefield long before any saber was drawn. For Anakin Skywalker, the chosen, the bound, the breaking slumber, no longer brought peace. It brought prophecy, not in words, but in fire, not in symbols, but in screams. He dreamed of her Padmam, skin pale, breath shallow, life slipping from her womb like sand through broken fingers, and he, powerless, always powerless. The Force does not give dreams lightly, and when it shows death, it does not offer mercy. He rose in sweat, limbs trembling beneath the smooth white sheets of a senator's chamber. Padme, still untouched by fate, asked what haunted him. He did not answer. How could he? The Jedi taught that attachment was dangerous. The Order forbade the very feelings that made his heart beat. So he smiled, lied, promised her safety. And in that lie, he began to search. He turned to the temple, to the council, and found silence. The Jedi, steeped in serenity, heard his fear, but offered riddles. Master Yoda, the oldest voice among them, warned him with gentle detachment. Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. But Anakin was not afraid of loss. He had already known loss. His mother dying in his arms, her life stolen by raiders while the council meditated. He was not afraid. He was angry. Angry that he had once begged for help and been ignored. Angry that they called love a weakness, but made him fight wars in the name of peace. Angry that they asked him to obey, and gave him nothing to believe in. And so he searched elsewhere. And the Shadow welcomed him. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, not robed in mysticism, but in understanding, opened his doors, his ears, his venom. He spoke of powers the Jedi did not teach. He spoke of legends buried in Sith tombs, of Darth Plagueis the Wise, a figure lost in myth who could manipulate life and death itself, a power to save Padme, not a temptation, a promise. Palpatine did not command, he did not demand, he sympathized, he soothed, he confirmed what Anakin had always feared. The Jedi did not trust him. The Jedi would let her die, and worse, they would call it balance. In the Force, lines began to twist. The currents darkened, not with malice, but with need. The Clone Wars, still raging across countless systems, were no longer about separation or unity. They were a crucible, a testing ground. Anakin led legions now, his blade a beacon, his victories spoken like prophecy fulfilled. The people called him hero, but the council, they called him tool. And so they placed him near the Chancellor, not out of trust, but out of suspicion. They asked him to spy, to betray the man who had never betrayed him. He obeyed, but inside, something shifted. A fracture, once hairline, began to roar. He returned to Padme with more lies, but she knew, she always knew. Her eyes, once full of joy, now glistened with fear, not of him, but for him. She carried their child now, a secret heartbeat inside her, life formed in love, forged in silence, and in his mind always. Her death always. He searched Jedi texts for answers, found none. He meditated. He broke his meditations in rage. The Force grew louder, not clearer, louder. It no longer whispered paths. It howled with uncertainty, as if the future itself recoiled. Then the final seed was planted. Palpatine revealed himself not as a guide, but as a gate. He was the Sith Lord the Jedi had long sought. Darth Sidious. He had orchestrated both sides of the war. He had Dooku, the Separatists, the Senate. He had bled the galaxy into chaos and offered only one cure. Join him and learn the secret to stop death. Anakin's breath caught like a blade in the throat. The line was crossed, but the decision was not yet made. He ran to the council. To Mace Windu confessed the Chancellor's truth, and Windu, grim, narrow, righteous, chose not to include Anakin in Sidious's arrest. He left him behind, as always, as ever. The prophecy once spoken in reverence, now twisted in shadows. Anakin, watch the skyline of Coruscant from a cold chamber. Watch the sun bleed behind metal towers. Watched the temple, his cage, his grave, and felt the Force split inside him. He had tried to do everything right. He had obeyed. He had fought. He had loved, and now everything he loved stood on the edge of death. Padme, the child, his purpose, the Jedi would not save them. They had proven this, but the Sith might. When Mace Windu confronted Sidious, Anakin followed, not as Jedi, not as Sith, as both, as neither. The scene that followed would echo through eternity. A blade, lifted to strike down Sidious. A scream, he must stand trial. But Windu would not listen. Sidious begged, lied, played weak, and Anakin fractured, desperate, doomed, chose. He severed Windu's hand. The lightning came. The Jedi Master died screaming, hurled into the Coruscant void. And in that moment, Anakin Skywalker fell, not with hatred, not with fury, but with pleading. What have I done? Palpatine, no longer the Chancellor, but Emperor, embraced him with a new name. Darth Vader, not as a title of power, but as a chain, and the Force shuddered. The one born to bring balance had joined the dark. Not because he was evil, but because he was afraid. He dreamed of her death, and in trying to stop it, he became the death of all things. Chapter 5. The Sith Mask smiles. He knelt in the shadows of the Chancellor's sanctum, thick with incense and deception. Anakin Skywalker fell to his knees before the architect of his ruin. Lightning still cracked the air. Mace Windu's screams still echoed beyond the glass, falling and falling into the night. And Palpatine, no longer masked, stood over him like a phantom from the old wars. A serpent cloaked in robes of law. Anakin spoke not in anger, but in shattering. I will do whatever you ask. Just help me save her. And thus was born Darth Vader, not with horns, not with flame, but with pleading. The name clung to him like ash. Vader, a word not ancient, but eternal, spoken by the Sith in their crypts. A title once buried, now reborn, and the mask, though not yet metal, had already formed. Not over his face, but over his will. The first task was sacred, terrible, the Jedi Temple, his home, his prison. He returned not as protector, but as executioner. The sky of Coruscant turned to bruised twilight. A clone battalion marched beside him, the 501st, blue armor gleaming like storm glass. Their helmets betrayed no question. Their blasters no mercy. Order 66 had been whispered into every soldier's bones. Kill the Jedi, all of them, now. But for Vader, it was not whispered. It was commanded. He entered the temple gates with silence. Lightsaber ignited, robes trailing like smoke. He became something no Jedi could name. He walked past halls where he once studied, past the chamber where younglings once bowed before Yoda and raised his blade. The children looked up. They knew him. They trusted him. He gave them no answer. Only light turned crimson in the records of the Force. That moment is a tear that never mends. Elsewhere, across 1,000 stars, the Jedi fell. Clones turned on masters with practiced precision. Ki-Adi-Mundi shot down in the snow. Ala Secura gunned down among the trees. Plo Koon shattered in his starfighter. The purge was surgical. Complete dot, and the galaxy blinked. And the Jedi were gone. Obi-Wan survived, barely. Yoda vanished into exile, burdened by failure older than war. Bail Organa escaped the storm with a single Jedi, a frightened youngling whose name would be lost to time. But the temple burned. Its beacon still shone in the skyline, but inside, nothing lived. Pam felt the tremor from afar. She watched the fires rising over the temple spires and knew something unspeakable had happened. When Anakin returned, his eyes were darker, his hands trembling, but his words calm. She asked what was happening. He spoke of a new empire, of peace, of strength, of safety for their child. She wanted to believe him. She did. But the man before her was no longer the boy who raced pods through Bunta dust. No longer the dreamer who kissed her hand beneath the stars. He spoke now like a priest of flame, and behind his eyes something else watched. Palpatine stood before the Senate, cloaked not in lies, but in truth, twisted. He blamed the Jedi for war, for betrayal, for treason, and the people cheered. Senators who once defended democracy rose in ovation as the Republic was buried beneath thunderous applause. And so, in the breath between epochs, an empire was born. The Sith no longer hid in shadow. They wore crowns. They passed laws. Vader became the Emperor's blade, a tool to excise what remained. He hunted the surviving Jedi not as man, but as myth. Inquisitors were trained, fallen initiates, corrupted minds, assassins dressed in memory. They followed his lead, painting the stars with blood. Each death carved away another piece of who he had been. But within the silence, Padme grew pale. Her joy waned. The Force inside her child turned turbulent, and she began to see what none had dared admit. Anakin Skywalker was dying, and Darth Vader was not saving her. He was killing her when she confronted him, begged him to return, to come away with her, to abandon the madness. He could not hear her. He heard only betrayal. He saw her standing beside Obi-Wan, and in his mind the lie completed itself. They had turned her against him. They wanted to steal his child. They wanted him weak, alone, and so his hand closed around her throat. She gasped, fell. Not dead, not yet, but broken. Obi-Wan emerged from the shadows, not to attack, to plead. But the time for pleading had passed. Anakin Skywalker, the boy born of sand and prophecy, had buried himself beneath armor yet unworn. The Force wept. Not for the Jedi, not for the Order, but for the child who had once dreamed of stars, and now drowned in flame. The Sith had no need to tempt him further. He had already crowned himself, and the galaxy was now his to burn. Chapter 6, Twilight. On Mustafar there, are places in the galaxy where the Force bleeds, not from wounds, but from choices. Mustafar is one such place, a broken world, carved by fire and sorrow, where the crust never cools, and the sky forgets how to be blue. The lava sings of betrayal. The smoke rises like the memory of sins, and here, in the furnace of destiny, the last breath of Anakin Skywalker would be taken. The Separatist leaders waited in silence on this volcanic tomb, unaware they had been sentenced. The war, always a shadow play, was no longer needed. Their purpose had been fulfilled, to fracture the galaxy, to birth the fear, to allow the Sith to rise unnoticed. Darth Sidious, now Emperor, had no more use for them, and so he sent his blade. Vader arrived, not as a messenger, but as a reaper. He walked through their chambers as if underwater, slow, calm, divine. They pled for mercy, spoke of alliances, of strategy, of diplomacy. He answered with silence, with red, with death. One by one, they fell. The war ended not with a treaty, but with a slaughter, and still he felt no peace. He stared out upon the rivers of molten fire, as if waiting for something or someone to rise from the heat and judge him. The mask had not yet been forged, but already he could feel its weight. Already his breath had changed. It was slower, heavier, like chains being drawn across stone, and from the stars, Padme came. She landed on Mustafar, cloaked in fear, yet full of hope. She believed she could still reach him, the boy beneath the ruin, the child from Tatooine. Her voice was soft, trembling. She spoke of escape, of raising their child in secret, of peace beyond war. But to Vader, her words were echoes. Her love, a threat. Her presence, proof of betrayal. He saw Obi-Wan emerge behind her, and in that moment his world collapsed. He did not hear reason, he heard conspiracy. He did not feel love, he felt ambush, and the fire that had always simmered beneath his heart since the first time he buried a feeling, since the first time he lied to obey, erupted. He reached for her throat. His fingers closed. Her breath stopped, and in that instant the Force shattered. She fell, unconscious, her body crumpling like memory. And Obi-Wan, brother, teacher, friend, stepped forward to face the thing that remained. Their duel began not with words, but with sorrow, blades ignited. Blue met blue. They moved like prophecy tearing itself apart. Across gantries and burning bridges they clashed. Every strike was layered in mourning, every parry a scream unsaid. Obi-Wan begged him to see, to stop, to remember. But Vader, no longer Anakin, not fully howled, of betrayal, of lies, of destiny denied. He was not the villain, he was the savior, and all those who stood against him would burn. The battle spilled across lava rivers, steam rising like ghosts. They were no longer Jedi, no longer human. They were the myth made flesh, balance and chaos locked in dance. But fate had chosen its victor, on the banks of fire. Anakin leaped recklessly, arrogantly. Obi-Wan's blade met flesh, legs, arm. Anakin fell screaming into the ash, his body ignited. His voice broke into madness. But Obi-Wan could not finish him. He could only watch. I loved you, Obi-Wan wept. You were my brother. But there was no brother left. Only smoke, only ash, only breath, turning to steam. Obi-Wan left him there, burning, screaming, alive above. In her ship, Padme lay dying. The medical droids could find no wound, but they knew she had lost the will to live. Her heart, once full of stars, had broken. In her final breath, she named the child Luke and the other Leia, and then she was gone. Darth Sidious arrived not as rescuer, but as collector. He found the ruin on the shore, half buried in black rock, a thing barely alive, and he ordered it saved, not out of mercy, but necessity. The armor was built, the breath was changed, the voice was remade, the mask was sealed, and when the chamber hissed and the monster awoke, Sidious told him, "She is dead. You killed her." The scream that followed was not human. It was the death cry of prophecy itself. The chosen one was gone. The galaxy, once filled with paths and futures and light, now stood beneath one shadow, and the lava of Mus still flows. It does not forget. Chapter 7. The iron breath begins. The first breath was pain, not from the body, for the body was gone. What remained was shell and circuit, sinew wired to will. No lungs, no heartbeat, only a hiss, a draw, a roar of air through metal, unnatural and constant. The breath of Darth Vader had begun, and with it, the silence of the galaxy. The armor, black as the void between stars, was not armor alone. It was prison, it was punishment, a cage forged not for defense, but for obedience. Sidious Emperor, Master Warden, had designed it so. Every movement carried weight, every nerve hummed with pain. The helmet dulled sensation, the suit rejected comfort, but Vader accepted it. He believed he deserved it, for in his mind he had failed her. And worse, he had become what he once feared. Padme was gone, her name never spoken again. The child, the prophecy, lost to time. The Jedi had been extinguished, the temple desecrated, the Republic erased, and the galaxy, now veiled in banners of red and black, belonged to the Sith. But Darth Vader did not rule. He served. He stood always a step behind the Emperor, not as an heir, but as a shadow. He executed orders with precision. He hunted survivors of the old order, Jedi who crawled in the dark like ghosts, begging the Force for salvation. There was none. The Inquisitorius was born, a band of broken Jedi, twisted by fear, bound to Vader's will. They hunted the remnants of light, guided by his presence, like wolves to blood. Yet Vader did not command them with words. He spoke with silence, with motion, with the hum of his blade igniting in the void. Wherever he walked, hope withered. But inside, he was hollow. He returned, at times, to the ruins of the temple, not to gloat, to mourn, to remember what he had burned with his own hand. The hall of archives, now blackened, the chamber of younglings, now dust. He would kneel in silence, listening to the ghosts the Jedi had left behind. Their echoes passed through his mask like whispers through stone. He visited Mustafar, not to conquer, but to suffer. There a fortress was constructed, not as home, but as a scar, a wound made into stone, built atop the place where Anakin Skywalker died. Lava flowed like memory. Screams still echoed in the canyons, and in its lowest chamber he meditated, not in the way of Jedi, not to quiet the mind, but to summon pain, to keep her voice alive in his ears, to keep the wound open. The Force had not abandoned him, but it had changed. It no longer felt warm, it no longer sang. It was sharp, now cold, cruel, precise. His powers deepened. He could crush minds with thought. command legions with a whisper. But each act of strength only buried him deeper in his cage, and the galaxy forgot what he once was. Tales spread like shadow fire of a black figure among the stars, of breath that preceded death, of a blade red as blood, never extinguished. To some he was myth, to others a curse. To the Empire he was fear made flesh, and still Sidious watched, always near, always testing, never trusting. The Sith rule of two, ancient and sacred, held one truth above all, that the apprentice would one day challenge the master. But Vader did not yet, for he still believed he had nothing left. No child, no wife, no destiny, only the breath, only the blade, only the mask. But the Force does not forget. It watches, it weaves, it waits, and in the hidden corners of the galaxy a spark remained, a child unnamed, unseen, growing beneath twin suns, a child untouched by Sith or Jedi, but bound by blood to prophecy. The chosen one had fallen, but the line had not, and the day would come when that spark would rise, when the iron breath would falter, and the mask would crack. But for now, Darth Vader reigned, not as king, not as savior, but as the sound that followed silence, the breath that preceded death, the dark enforcer of a dark empire, the man who once dreamed of freedom, now chained within his own armor, and the galaxy forgot to dream. Chapter 8. The secret children of the Force. The galaxy believed it was done with prophecy, that the chosen one had fallen, and with him the last fire of hope. But the Force is not bound by belief. It is not halted by death. Its will moves, hidden, slow, sacred, and so it happened that two children were born, not into glory, but into shadow. Luke, Leia. Twins, born of Padma Amidala, born of Anakin Skywalker, born into silence. As their mother faded, as the iron breath of Vader echoed down the halls of the Empire's throne, the children were hidden. Yoda, broken by failure. Obi-Wan, scarred by grief. Bail Organa, noble and silent. Together they made a choice, a final hope. To scatter the children, to sever their names from prophecy, to bury their bloodline in the dirt of obscurity. Leia was taken to Alderaan, royal, luminous, untouched by war. She would be raised a princess, a senator, a voice of defiance. Luke was returned to dust. Tatooine, the beginning, the grave, placed in the care of Owen and Beru Lars, simple moisture farmers, bound by no Jedi creed. The boy grew beneath the very suns that once burned across his father's eyes. He played in the canyons where Anakin once bled. He watched the sky as his father once did, dreaming of escape, but he did not know who he was, nor who watched from the shadows. Obi-Wan, now no longer a master, no longer a general, had become something quieter, something colder. Ben, a hermit, a ghost. He lived not far, always watching, never touching. He wandered the dunes in silence, spoke to none, carried the guilt of a galaxy across his shoulders like a cloak of iron. He had failed the boy's father. He would not fail the son, and so, while Vader hunted Jedi through stars and smoke, his own son grew wild and free, far from the Empire's gaze. Leia, too, grew strong, a mind sharpened by politics, a spirit forged in quiet rebellion. She spoke like a mother, walked like a mother, but within her another storm brewed. The Force was not absent in her. It pulsed, unseen, like the tide beneath a frozen sea, waiting. The children of Skywalker were not born Jedi. They were born forgotten, but the Force remembered. It reached through time and dream. It whispered through rusted droids and fallen sabers. It touched the mind of a farm boy watching the stars. It coiled around a princess speaking against tyranny. Vader did not know, and that ignorance became the galaxy's final hope. Yet the shadow crept closer. The Emperor's gaze widened. The Inquisitors searched without knowing what they sought. Whispers reached Sidious, that a presence stirred, that the old blood was not yet cold, but prophecy is patient, and the Force waits in silence. Vader, now legend, believed his past had been buried. He did not dream of her anymore, nor of children. He dreamed only of fire. He stood upon the bridge of star destroyers. He commanded fleets. He destroyed cities. He spoke to governors like a blade speaks to flesh. He sought no companionship. He trusted no soul, not even the Emperor. Yet sometimes, in the silence between breath and breath, a name would echo in the hollows of his mind. Padam, not shouted, not remembered, but felt. It was not enough to save him, but it was enough to haunt him. And the Force, unbound by flesh or death, continued its quiet war. It moved the stars. It stirred the minds of rebels. It placed old sabers into new hands, and far from the Empire, in the silence of Tatooine's wastes, a boy stared at the horizon, not knowing that he was the echo of a fallen night, the seed of a prophecy that refused to die. An empire stood, a father knelt in armor, and a child dreamed. The Force had not given up. Chapter 9. The spark beneath the Dust-Atuan slumbers. Beneath its suns, a world of dust, of bone, of silence. The galaxy forgets it, a wound long scabbed over, but the Force does not forget. Here, hidden beneath layers of sand and time, a spark kindles, a name unspoken, a bloodline asleep. Luke, he was not raised with legend, no cradle of saber or song, no tale of the Chosen One or the fall of Jedi. He knew only hardship, suns that blistered the skin, machines that rusted in the heat, days that passed with no meaning but survival. And yet the boy looked always to the sky. At dusk, when shadows stretched long and twin stars bled gold into the dirt, he would stare and ache without knowing why. He was born to the Force, but had never been taught its name. The spark within him had not yet caught fire, but it watched through the eyes of Obi-Wan, who lived not far in exile and penance. He had aged, though not in years. His voice was hoarse now, his eyes distant. Each day he wandered the dunes with a silence like prayer. He spoke sometimes to ghosts, to Qui-Gon, to memories, but mostly to himself. He had given up the savor, but not the watch. Luke grew. His hands learned machines, like his father's once did. His heart rebelled against the quiet, as Anakin's once had. But the path was not the same, for Obi-Wan guided without guiding, protected without revealing. He knew the moment would come, when the Force would stir and the spark would be needed. That moment began not with war, but with two droids, C-3PO and R2-D2, relics from an older myth, wandered from the stars and fell again into Skywalker's line, carriers of a message, a plea, from a sister he did not know. Leia, cloaked in secrecy, a voice speaking across light years. "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope." And with that spark, The past began to awaken. Luke, drawn by fate and ignorance, followed the droids, found Obi-Wan, found the saber, an old thing, an artifact, once Anakin's, now silent. The blade of a man who burned, the weapon of a legacy denied. Obi-Wan did not speak all truths. He spoke of a father who was a great pilot, a good friend. He did not speak of lava, of screams, of betrayal. Truth, like fire, can burn before it warms. But Luke held the saber, and the saber remembered. In that moment, the Force stirred in him like wind through canyon stone. Not a storm, not yet, but something. Ancient. And then came the Empire. Stormtroopers, fire, death. Owen and Beru burned to ash. Luke's past erased in a single breath, with nothing left to lose. He followed the old knight into the stars. They journeyed to Alderaan and found it gone, a world erased by a new weapon. The Death Star, an orb of steel, a wound in space, and within it, a prisoner. Leia, his sister, though neither knew. Vader, too, was there. Not by coincidence, but by fate. He felt something, a presence, familiar, unsettling. He did not yet know it was his son. But the Force whispered. In the corridors of the Death Star, Obi-Wan met his end. Not in fear, in surrender. He allowed the blade to strike. His body vanished. His voice remained. He became, at last, what he had failed to be in life, a guide, a whisper, a part of the Force. And Luke, orphan now of mother, father, uncle, mentor, flew into war. He joined the rebellion, learned battle, war, hope like armor. But inside, the spark burned brighter. The Force called him, though he barely understood. It guided his aim, his reflexes, his vision, and in the moment of greatest fear, when the Death Star approached the hidden moon, he heard the voice, "Use the Force, Luke," and so he did. The torpedoes flew, the station fell, and a legend began. But Vader survived. He watched the boys escape. He felt the surge in the Force. It was no longer a whisper, it was a cry. He did not know his name, but he knew his power, and for the first time in years, the dark mask tilted and questioned. The past was not buried, the prophecy had not died, and the spark beneath the dust had become a flame. Chapter 10. The saber reforged in shadow, the blade that once sang in Anakin's hand, had changed hands again, passed not through ceremony, but through exile, not given in glory, but in grief. Luke held it now. It hummed with memory of clone wars, of fallen friends, of children silenced in halls of light. It pulsed in his hand. Like a living thing, it remembered screams. It remembered fire. And yet, it did not reject him. For though it had known only destruction, it now stirred with hope. After the Death Star's fall, the galaxy did not erupt in peace. It shuddered. The rebellion grew bold. The Empire struck back. And Vader hunted. Not merely rebels, not merely survivors. He hunted truth. He demanded answers the Emperor would not give. Who was the pilot who destroyed the station? Why had the Force surged in him like a sun? Why had his presence felt familiar? The Emperor, cloaked in eternal patience, spoke only in riddles. The son of Skywalker must not become a Jedi. And in that phrasing, Vader knew. Not speculation, not rumor. Truth. Anakin Skywalker had not died alone. The child had lived, hidden. The lie shattered something inside the armor. The Emperor had feared this day, and had kept it from him. But now, the apprentice began to awaken. The boy was real, and somewhere in the galaxy Luke trained, not with temples, not with order, but with ghosts. Yoda, last of the old, waited on Dagobah, not as warrior, as test. There, among the mist and rot, Luke faced what no saber could cut: his own fear, his own anger. Visions came, of Vader, of himself beneath the mask, of destinies folded in mirrors. The cave showed him that darkness was not out there, but within, and still. He chose the path. His training incomplete, his resolve raw, but his heart unshaken. Luke returned to his friends, to Leia, to Han, to the rebellion. But destiny had already turned its gaze. Cloud City, betrayal, trap, revelation, there. Vader waited, their sabers clashed, not like old Jedi duels, but like storm meeting storm. Luke fought not to win, but to survive, to understand, to delay the truth. But the Force cannot be delayed, only endured. The battle ended not in death, but in truth. A hand severed, a scream silenced, and the voice of his father, not in myth, but in flesh. I am your father. 4 words, they cracked the galaxy open. Luke fell not only from the platform, but from certainty. He had believed in a hero, and found a monster wearing his blood. The Force screamed inside him, a storm of questions. Was he meant to follow the same path? Was he doomed to the same fall? He survived, broken but alive, and somewhere in the hollows of space, Darth Vader stood in silence. He had revealed himself, not as killer, but as father, not as Sith, but as origin. He waited, for the first time in decades, not for orders, but for response. He reached out. Join me. But the boy had chosen pain, chosen the long path, and the saber, lost in that battle, would return, not to Vader, but to another. A new blade would be forged, not in Kyber, in conviction. Luke's journey had changed. No longer was he a boy with a weapon. He was the son of a fallen god, and every step forward now echoed with prophecy. He would become the last hope, or the final echo. Vader knew this, so did Sidious, and as the pieces shifted, as the shadows deepened, one truth hovered over all. The blade had passed hands, but the wound had not healed, and the time was coming when son would face father, not as student and master, but as mirror and reflection, and only one would emerge whole. Chapter 11. The throne of the two shadows. In the heart of the galaxy, the dark throne waits. It is not carved of stone, it is not adorned with gold. It is forged of will, ancient, patient, absolute. Upon it sits the Sith, eternal, Darth Sidious, Emperor of the known stars, Master of death, Architect of decay. His eyes see what others cannot, not the present, not the war, but the shape of endings. He feels the balance tremble. The old prophecy, long thought dead, lost in the flames of Mustafar, now breathes again. Skywalker's blood has returned. The sun lives. The sun grows, and Vader, his apprentice, his blade, his ruin, hesitates. There is danger in that hesitation. Not because Vader loves, that part of him died long ago, but because a fragment of Anakin remains, buried, crushed, breathing. Sidious knows. And so he prepares his throne, the throne of two shadows, two Skywalkers, two fates. One must fall. The Emperor lays his trap, not with sabers, but with time. He allows the rebellion to strike. He draws them toward him, not in fear, but with precision. He builds the second Death Star, not as weapon, but as bait, incomplete, vulnerable, obvious. The illusion of opportunity, and Luke. Comes the boy has grown. He is no longer a farmer, no longer a wanderer. He wears the black of a knight, but his eyes are calm, his voice tempered. He has seen fear, he has tasted hatred, and still he stands in the light. He turns himself in, not to surrender, but to reach his father. It is not a trap to him, it is a calling. He believes even now that the man beneath the mask can be saved. And Vader, the cold enforcer of the Empire, does not strike him down. He listens. They walk the halls of the Death Star, together master and heir. Luke speaks of pardon. Vader does not answer. Luke speaks of the good that remains. Vader turns away, but in his silence there is no rage, only wait. For the first time in decades, the force within him does not tremble with pain. It trembles with choice. But Sidious watches. He welcomes them both into the throne room. Not as guests, as players, 3 figures, 3 paths, 1 throne. He tempts Luke, not with rage, but with righteousness. Strike me down, he says. Do it in anger. Take your place at your father's side. He knows how to bend the bloodline. He did it once, he will do it again. The battle outside rages, the rebellion dies, the fleet burns, and Luke breaks. He ignites his saber. He attacks not for himself, but for his friends, for justice, for love. But the dark side does not care for reasons, only for moments. And as saber meets saber son against father, the prophecy unfolds again. They duel beneath the Emperor's gaze, one defending, one pleading. Vader strikes hard, Luke strikes harder, until, in a fury of strength, Luke overpowers him. He severs the cybernetic hand. It clatters to the floor, sparks and smoke, and beside it, Luke sees his own gloved hand, the reflection, the choice. He steps back, he breathes, and he throws the saber away. I am a Jedi, like my father before. Me, the words echo, not through the room, through the Force. A declaration, a refusal, a redemption. The Emperor snarls. He turns on the boy. Lightning flows from his fingers, not natural, but divine and blasphemous. Raw power, hatred made light. Luke screams, falls, burns. Vader watches. The Emperor orders, you will die. And then, a tremble, not in Luke, in Vader. His mask turns, not toward power, toward the boy, toward his son. In that moment, there is no Sith, there is no Jedi, there is only a father, and the mask breaks, not in metal. In will. He lifts Sidious, the dark god, the master of centuries, and hurls him into the abyss. Screams, light, silence, and in that silence, the Force breathes again. But Vader is dying. His breath falters, the suit hisses. The flesh beneath is scorched, failing. Luke removes the mask. For the first time, father and son see one another with nothing between them. The eyes are pale, the skin ruined, but the voice is Anakin's. Tell your sister you were right. And he is gone. Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one, has fulfilled the prophecy, not by power, by love, by sacrifice. The throne of 2 shadows is broken. The night recedes, but the galaxy has only begun to heal. Chapter 12. Ashes of the Chosen One. There is no sound when a god dies, only wind, only stillness. The throne is empty, the Death Star broken. The Empire, bleeding dot and Anakin Skywalker, the name, once whispered in prophecy, is gone, but not forgotten. Luke carries the body, not of Darth Vader, but of his father. Heavy with armor, empty of rage, the fire is built beneath Ender's trees. No monument, no tomb, only flame. The mask burns first, the face the galaxy feared, then the armor, the cage that held the breath of the Empire. Then the rest, ash, drifts into the sky like forgotten stars. The Force does not speak. It listens, and for the first time in many lifetimes, it does not tremble with pain. The prophecy, so long corrupted by war, by fear, by misunderstanding, has been fulfilled. But not as the Jedi once imagined, not through conquest, not through light triumphant, but through return. The Chosen One fell, he became shadow. He broke the galaxy, and in the end, he unmade that shadow. He broke the Master. He saved the sun. Balance, once a dream, now breathes again. But balance does not mean peace. The Empire crumbles, but the wound remains. Worlds still burn, scars still bleed. Leia watches the pyre from afar. She does not yet know the full truth, but she feels it, a presence flickering, familiar, vast. The bloodline stirs in her too, not with fire, with purpose. She will not take up the blade. Not yet, but the Force has already marked her. The twins stand on either side of history now. Luke, the last Jedi, Leia, the seed of what will come next. And the galaxy waits not for kings, not for war, for healing. Luke returns to the stars with silence in his heart. He does not celebrate. He does not boast. He has seen the full circle, from hope to ruin to sacrifice. He has walked the edge of his father's fall and chosen another path. And so, on a quiet night, beneath unfamiliar stars, he sees them. Ghosts, OBI-1, calm, sorrowful, proud. Yoda, small in size, infinite in burden. And Anakin, not in armor, not in pain, but young again, as he was before the fire. He says nothing, but he smiles. And in that smile is peace, a peace long denied. The galaxy will write myths. They will speak of Vader's terror, of Luke's bravery, of the rebellion's courage. But the Force remembers more. It remembers a boy born in slavery, who dreamed of stars, a man who loved too deeply and fell too far, a monster who breathed in iron and killed in silence, and finally, a father who chose love over power. The ashes fall, but from them something stirs, not order, not empire, but possibility. And far away, across the stars, the Force breathes through children yet unborn. The Skywalker line is not done. Chapter 13. The echoes between stars, the war has ended. But the silence afterward is not peace. It is reflection. It is echo. For every voice silenced by blaster fire, by saber light, by tyranny, another rises in memory. And in these echoes, the Force continues its quiet work. The rebellion celebrates. Ender's skies flicker with firelight and music. But Luke Skywalker does not rejoice as others do. He has seen too much. He has felt death's breath on his skin. He has watched a father die twice, once to darkness, once to light. He stands beneath the stars, wondering not what has been won, but what remains undone. For balance is not a destination. It is a wound that must be guarded, It is breath held in the lungs of the galaxy, and the galaxy still trembles. Leah senses it too, though she speaks the language of senators, not mystics. The force flows through her veins. She does not yet seek to wield it, but it watches her, waits for her. She walks paths Anakin once could not. She leads not with fear, but with memory. In her is the wisdom of Podum, the will of Skywalker, the fire of the stars themselves, and somewhere far across the void, the whispers stir. The Emperor is gone, but not all darkness dies with its master. There are remnants, admirals who bow to no one, warlords with no god but chaos. The Empire does not vanish, it splinters, and from those shards danger grows. But deeper still, beneath politics and armies, something older wakes. The Force moves strangely. Visions come to Luke now, unbidden and unkind. Not of triumph, of questions. A tree burning in twilight, a temple buried in ash, a hand outstretched, and a choice unmade. The ghosts return, OBI-1, quiet and distant. Yoda, cryptic and watching. Anakin speaking less than either. He appears, often to Luke, not as Vader, as the man he was before, but his voice holds sorrow. Not for himself, for what will come. He cannot see beyond death, but he knows. His end was not the end. Luke begins to wander. He leaves Endor, leaves war, takes only the robes on his back and the questions in his heart. He travels to forgotten worlds, places once held sacred by the Jedi. Now buried in sand and time, he reads old texts with trembling fingers. He listens to the wind. He waits for the Force to speak, but it does not roar. It whispers. It shows him a truth deeper than battle, that the Jedi, too, failed. That their codes, their rituals, their pride, birthed their own end. That the light, when too rigid, becomes blind, and the dark, when unchecked, becomes a mirror of pain. He begins to see what the prophecy may truly mean. Not the rise of a single savior, but the rebirth of the Force itself, balanced, whole. But such things come not without cost. As Luke meditates among ancient stone, he hears new voices. Not ghosts, children, yet unborn, scattered across the stars, carriers of light, seekers of shadow. They call not to him, but through him. The future is forming, and it is wild. The name Skywalker will echo again, not as legend, as burden. The Force is not done. It waits, it listens, and in its silence, the next chapter of the galaxy prepares to awaken. Chapter 14. The Temple That Never Was. In the oldest places of the galaxy, where no ships fly and no names are spoken, the bones of the Jedi lie buried, not in coffins, in silence. In failure, there once stood temples on many worlds, Jeddah, Ossus, Ilum, Lothal, monasteries of light, sanctuaries of meaning, all gone, crushed beneath empires, devoured by time. But Luke Skywalker wanders among them now, not as a conqueror, not as a pilgrim, but as a question seeking its answer. He is the last Jedi, not in title, in spirit, for what is a Jedi without the Order, without council, or temple, or war? He searches these ruined places, not for weapons, but for wisdom. He finds fragments, holocrons, fractured and dim, scriptures carved into walls with hands long dead, voices that speak in riddles, warning of pride, of blindness, of prophecy twisted by control. And slowly, Luke begins to understand. The old Jedi Order fell, not because the Sith were strong, but because the Jedi forgot how to feel. They severed themselves from love, from grief, from fear. In the name of peace, they silenced truth. In the name of light, they ignored the shadow. And so the Force, seeking balance, birthed Anakin, a mirror, a wound, a cure. But the cure burned, and now only ashes remain. Luke sits within the bones of one of these temples, watching sunlight fall through a shattered dome, and in the dust he sees what could have been children training with kindness, masters teaching not control, but understanding. He sees a temple that never was, a place where Jedi might have wept for their dead, might have loved without fear, might have listened to the will of the Force rather than command it. But that temple was never built, and so he begins to build it, not in stone, in thought. He gathers what he can. Old teachings, new questions, new questions. He listens to the Force, not as a master, but as a student. And from this listening comes a vision. He sees a new generation, not copies of the old, but something different, not warriors, seekers, not soldiers, guides, children scattered across the stars, each with the Force inside them, not to be trained into obedience, but into truth. He will teach them not to fight the dark, but to understand it, not to banish fear, but to walk beside it. He will show them what the Jedi forgot, that to be light, one must carry the shadow, too, but shadows still move beyond his reach. The galaxy is not healed. Old powers slumber, and in secret corners, whispers of the Sith rise again, not in name, but in hunger. The dark is patient, it learns, and somewhere, far beyond even Luke's sight, the echo of Palpatine's will coils through the void. But for now, he teaches. He begins the temple, a new temple, built not on Coruscant or in glory, but among the trees, beneath the stars, with time, with patience, with hope. He gathers students, learns their fears, guides their dreams. He is no longer just a son. He is no longer just a Jedi. He is the bearer of balance, the one who rebuilds from ruin. But destiny watches, and not all who are trained remain true. The Force holds its breath, once more, for peace is never the end. Chapter 15. The Apprentice and the Abyss. The temple stood quiet, hidden among trees, far from war, far from empires. Here the Force flowed gently, not in torrents, but in streams. The new Jedi did not wear armor. They did not recite the old creeds. They learned to listen, to feel, to walk among both light and shadow. And Luke watched over them. He was not the master the council once demanded. He did not sit on thrones or speak in absolutes. He knelt in the dirt beside his students. He taught what he had learned in ruin. But even in this sacred quiet, the Abyss watched. Among the students was one who shone brighter than the rest. Ben Solo, son of Leia, grandson of Anakin. In him the Force sang, not as a whisper, as a storm. He was power incarnate, wild, restless, filled with questions. He bore the blood of prophecy, the weight of two lines, Skywalker and Organa. But blood is not destiny, and strength is not peace. Luke loved him, trained him, feared for him. For in Ben's silence, Luke began to feel echoes, not of the Jedi, of the Sith. Visions came again, of fire, of death, of a temple burning, of a face consumed by shadow, not Vader's. Ben's Luke buried these fears. He told no one. But the abyss does not sleep. It speaks in dreams. And to Ben, it spoke clearly. Voices from beyond, ancient, velvet, patient, Snoke, a name, a shadow, a mask of something deeper. He whispered not commands, but understanding. He did not demand Ben's loyalty. He offered answers. Why the light felt cold, why the Jedi felt afraid, why power was truth, and weakness was a lie. Ben listened, and in the silence of night, something inside him turned. Luke saw it, too late. He entered Ben's chamber, not with a blade, but with dread. He peered into his nephew's sleeping mind. He saw the abyss, rising, a darkness that was not born in Ben, but drawn to him. A scar passed through generations, and for a moment, a single breath, Luke ignited his savor. Not to strike, to weigh the cost, but Ben awoke, and saw not fear, but betrayal. The temple burned that night. Screams rose into the trees. Ash fell like snow. Students died. Others followed Ben into the void, and Skywalker vanished. He left no trail, no message, only silence. The temple, the hope of the galaxy, was gone, and from its ruins rose a new name, Kylo Ren. He wore no Sith title, but the dark side bled from every breath. He swore himself to the First Order, the rebirth of the Empire, forged from ashes. And vengeance, but his true loyalty, was to the void, to Snoke, to the ghost that still wore Sidious's mask. And Leia felt her son vanish, not in death, in darkness. She wept not aloud, but the stars dimmed around her. The prophecy had circled. Again, not ended, not fulfilled, only changed. Ben Solo was not Anakin, but the abyss had found its heir. Luke, now hidden on the sacred island of Ahch-To, spoke to no one. He lived among ruins of the first Jedi temple. He severed his connection to the Force. He let the galaxy burn without him. He believed that the Jedi must end, for every time the light had risen, it cast longer shadows. He saw no more balance, only cycles, only blood. But the Force was not done with him, for across the stars, a new seeker had begun her path, and destiny was circling once more. Chapter 16. The scavenger and the flame she came from nowhere, a world of wreckage, a desert of the dead Jakku, a place where machines rotted in the sun, where old wars were buried but never forgotten. Her name was Rey. No family, no lineage, only hunger, only silence, only dreams she could not explain. She scavenged ruins of empires she did not remember, walked through the metal bones of star destroyers, slept beneath the bellies of war machines. She had no teacher, no map, and yet the Force stirred around her. It followed her, waited for her. She thought herself alone, but she was already chosen, the blade, the saber that once sang for Anakin. Then Luke called to her. It did not ask her name. It knew her. When her fingers touched the hilt, the galaxy shifted. Visions poured into her. Rain and fire, islands and screams. Ben Solo, Luke, darkness without shape. She fell back, trembling, but the saber remained. It had found her, the Force had chosen, but she did not understand. Who was she to hold it? Who was she to answer its call? The resistance rose around her. The First Order hunted her, and Kylo Ren sensed her. He had stood where she now stood, caught between silence and storm. He saw in her a mirror, but he mistook it for weakness. He struck, he demanded, but she did not yield. In their first clash, deep in the woods beneath falling snow. She fought not with training, with instinct, with flame, and when the saber flew into her hand, not his, the force declared its will. She wounded him, not fatally, but deeply, not in flesh. In doubt, who was this girl? Why had the blade chosen her? Why had the force whispered her name? He returned to his master, bleeding, Snoke seethed. The light had risen again. Meanwhile, Rey sought the one who had vanished. Luke Skywalker. The last Jedi, the exile. She crossed stars, climbed cliffs, endured silence, and found him, alone, old, haunted. She held out the saber, like prophecy, reborn. But he turned away. He did not see hope. He saw failure. He refused the blade, refused the force. He told her the truth, that he had trained his nephew, that he had failed him, that the Jedi should end, for they had brought only ruin. But Rey was not there for history. She was there for meaning. She followed him, listened to the wind, sat beneath ancient trees, learned to feel, not to command, and the force opened around her. She touched both calm and storm. She saw life and death intertwined, and beneath it all, she felt something else, a pull, not to power, to identity. She needed to know who she was. Luke could not tell her. Leia could not tell her. Only the Force could. But the Force tells no stories. It only reveals. Kylo Ren reached out to her, through it. They touched, not in space, but in soul, and through that veil, they saw each other fully. He saw the loneliness in her. She saw the conflict in him. For a moment, the prophecy wavered. Perhaps they could balance one another. Perhaps this time, both light and dark could be held without war. She went to him, believing she could turn him, save him. But Snoke waited, and again. The throne of two shadows loomed. Snoke mocked her, tortured her, commanded Kylo to strike her down, and Kylo turned. He killed Snoke, not for the light, not for the Jedi, for himself, and he offered her a place beside him. Together, they could destroy the past, reforge the galaxy, break the cycle, but she refused. She saw in him not salvation, but repetition, not love. Possession, they fought. The saber shattered, each claimed half. Each left wounded, and the galaxy fractured further. Luke felt the shift. He rose one final time, not to fight, to face his fear, to answer the Force on Crate in the red dust of resistance. He faced Kylo Ren, not with rage, but with peace. He stood alone, as legend, as myth, as spark. He distracted the First Order. He saved the Resistance, and when Kylo struck, the blade passed through nothing. Luke was not there, only his projection, his will, his defiance. Across the galaxy, the story took root. Luke Skywalker, unbroken, standing before an army. But alone on the island, Luke faded. He became one. With the Force, not in failure. In fulfillment, he had passed the flame dot to Rey, to the future. But the dark was not vanquished, only delayed, and the shadows behind Kylo Ren had only begun to move. Chapter 17. The voice that refused, silence in the void beyond the stars. The past was not dead. It lingered, silent, coiled, waiting. The Emperor had fallen, his body had burned, but his will endured. Palpatine, Darth Sidious, he who devoured the Jedi, who twisted prophecy, who wore the Force like a cloak of rot. He had not vanished, he had prepared. For death is not the end for those who master the unnatural. In the unknown regions, beyond maps, beyond time, there rose Exegol, a world of storm and stone, a hidden graveyard of Sith, a place where the dark side pooled thick as blood. There, in secret, his cult rebuilt what the galaxy thought lost: clones, chambers, machines that whispered of eternal life. And in a body not whole, not truly living, the Emperor returned, no longer a man, a wound, a voice without end. He watched from the shadows as the First Order rose. He whispered into Snoke's shell. He guided Ben Solo's fall, and now, with the last Jedi scattered and hope flickering, he declared himself again, not just Sith, all Sith, an Empire reborn in silence. But the Force, too, had not been still. Rey searched for meaning, not in power, but in truth. She touched ancient texts, listened to the Jedi who came before, voices of Yoda, Obi-Wan, Anakin, even Luke, now one with the Force. They did not command her, they guided. And in their words, she heard something new. She was not chosen by blood, she was chosen by choice. She was not a daughter of Jedi. She was not a Skywalker, but the Force had called. Her Palpatine's blood ran through her veins. His voice clawed in her dreams. You are my granddaughter. He offered her the throne. Not in mockery, in destiny. Strike me down in anger, he said, and my spirit shall pass into you. The Sith will live again. You will be Empress of all. But she had learned, from Luke, from Leia, from failure, from love, and in the end, she did not strike him down in rage. She stood in silence, and as the Emperor rose, lightning pouring from his hands, she stood alone, but not unloved. Voices rose, not in her ears, in her soul. The Jedi, all of them, answered, "Be with me." And they were. In that moment, she was not one. She was many. Rey rose. She crossed the sabers, Anakin's legacy, in both hands, and she turned the darkness back on itself. The lightning reflected, the flesh burned, the voice screamed, and the Sith ended. Palpatine, the rot at the center of the galaxy, was unmade, not by blood, by defiance, but the cost was nearly her life. And it was Ben, no longer Kylo, no longer Sith, who gave it back. He laid his hand upon her. He gave all that remained, and then he vanished, returned to the Force. Skywalker's blood, cleansed not by power, but by sacrifice. Rey stood alone among ruins, not chosen by destiny, but choosing her own. And when the fires burned low, she went to the sands of Tatooine to wear it. All began to the place of twin suns, and buried names. She buried the sabers, Anakin's, Leia's, and she built her own, not blue, not red. Gold balanced. And when a stranger asked her name, she paused, not in doubt, in reverence. She looked to the horizon, saw Luke, saw Leia, and answered, Rey Skywalker. Not by blood, by will. And in that moment, the Force exhaled. The voice of the Jedi, long silenced, long scattered, had become one. But the Force is never still, and legends never end. Chapter 18. The Force that dreams in silence. There is no ending to the Force, only stillness, only breath. It does not sleep, but it dreams, and in its dreaming it remembers the Jedi, the Sith, the rise and fall of empires, the twin suns setting over the life of a child born into chains. Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one, he was never meant to be perfect. He was meant to break, to shatter the illusion that light alone could save, that darkness alone must destroy. He was born of the Force, not summoned, but shaped, not for glory, for balance, and yet balance is not peace. It is a blade held at the center of a storm. Anakin loved, that was his power. He feared, that was his weakness. He fell, not for conquest, but for the lie that fear could protect love. Darth Vader was not his opposite. He was his echo, and even in the armor, even through death, the Force never abandoned him. Luke, born of that love, bore the flame into a colder world. He walked paths the Jedi had forgotten. He listened to silence. He rebuilt what had crumbled, and still he failed. But the Force does not demand victory. It demands truth, and in that truth, redemption was born, not in one act, but in many. Rey, the final thread, wove them all together. She was not created by prophecy. She was not born to royalty. She came from nothing, and that was everything. The Force chose her not because of blood, but because of possibility, because she stood before the dark and said no, because she stood before the light and asked why. She did not inherit destiny, she shaped it, and so the Skywalker line ends, not with blood, but with choice, a name claimed not by lineage, but by devotion. Skywalker, not a man, not a family, but a legacy. A light in the dark, a refusal to vanish. Now, the Force dreams. It dreams of children in distant stars, feeling something stir in their hearts. It dreams of ancient temples, not yet built, of sabers not yet forged, of voices not yet silenced. The Jedi are not gone, they are quiet, and the Sith, they do not scream anymore. They are ash on the wind, but the Force still waits, not for war, for balance, not for masters, for seekers, not for legends, for truth. This story is not the beginning. It is not the end. It is a breath held for a moment in the lungs of eternity. When next it exhales, a new tale will begin, and somewhere in the silence between stars, the Force whispers still, remember, remember the Skywalker, remember the fall, remember the rise, remember the choice, and sleep now, child of the galaxy. The story has been told. The Force is with you. It always was. It always will be. *The end.